The massive throne room of the Zephyrian Empire stretched out like a dark cathedral, its crystalline walls pulsing with an eerie blue light. Queen Zalara sat upon her obsidian throne, her 6 arms gracefully draped over the armrests while her serpentine tail coiled beneath her. Her scaled skin shimmered with natural armor plating that had evolved over millions of years, making her species the most feared warriors in the known galaxy. Before her stood representatives from dozens of conquered worlds, each bearing tribute from their defeated civilizations. The Krillian Beastmasters offered exotic creatures from their jungle worlds. The techno-priests of Meridian presented advanced weapons that could level mountains. The Crystal Singers of Andromeda brought sonic devices capable of shattering entire fleets. But today was different. Today, the Queen had received word of a new species that dared to resist her expanding empire. A species that called themselves humans. "Your Majesty," spoke Commander Zex, her chief military advisor, his voice a harsh rasp through his breathing apparatus. "The scouts have returned from the Outer Rim territories. They bring news of the human resistance." Queen Zalara's 4 eyes narrowed as she leaned forward slightly. "Tell me of these humans. What makes them think they could defy the might of the Zephyrian Empire?" Commander Zex activated a holographic display that showed images of human settlements, their primitive cities, and their laughably simple technology. They're a young species, barely evolved from their homeworld. Their technology is crude, their weapons basic projectile systems that fire metal slugs. Their ships are held together with welded metal plates and chemical propulsion. A ripple of laughter echoed through the throne room from the assembled alien dignitaries. The idea that such a primitive species would dare to resist the Empire was absurd. "They have no natural armor," Zex continued, gesturing to the holographic humans. "No claws, no venom, no psychic abilities. They are soft, fragile creatures that live for barely a century. Their bones break easily, their skin tears at the slightest contact with our weapons." Queen Zalara studied the images with growing amusement. Humans appeared to be bipedal mammals with no visible natural defenses. They were hairless except for small patches on their heads, had only 2 arms and 2 legs, and seemed to require external coverings to protect their delicate skin from their own environment. "And yet," she said, her voice carrying a dangerous edge, "they continue to resist. My fleets report unexpected losses." "How do you explain this, Commander?" Zex's breathing apparatus wheezed as he shifted uncomfortably. "The humans fight with unpredictable tactics, Your Majesty. They seem to ignore conventional military doctrine. When our forces land on their worlds expecting organized resistance, they find chaos instead. Humans attack from unexpected angles, use their own damaged ships as weapons, and refuse to surrender even when facing certain death." Desperation, Queen Zalara dismissed with a wave of one of her hands. "All primitive species fight harder when cornered. It changes nothing. Well, they're warriors. Surely a species so weak must have some elite fighting force." "That is where it becomes strange, Your Majesty," Zex replied, pulling up more data. "They speak of their warriors as if they were legends. Stories passed down through generations of individuals who possess impossible abilities. They call them heroes, champions, soldiers who single-handedly turn the tide of entire wars." The Queen's tail lashed behind her throne. "Impossible. No single individual, regardless of species, could stand against the combined might of our legions. These are clearly primitive myths, stories told to give hope to a dying race." "Perhaps, Your Majesty. But our interrogations of captured humans reveal something disturbing. They genuinely believe these stories. They speak of humans who have survived impossible odds, who have defeated enemies many times their size and strength. They tell tales of warriors who fight on even when mortally wounded, who sacrifice themselves to save others, who turn certain defeat into victory through sheer determination." Queen Zalara stood from her throne, her impressive height casting shadows across the chamber. At nearly 3 meters tall, with her natural armor and multiple limbs, she was a living weapon that had personally led the conquest of 17 worlds. Myths and legends, she declared, her voice echoing off the crystalline walls. Every dying species clings to such stories. The humans will fall like all the others before them. Their primitive weapons and fragile bodies are no match for evolved perfection. But even as she spoke, a small part of her mind wondered about the reports. The humans had managed to destroy 3 entire battlecruisers in the past month alone. Their losses were mounting, and the conquest that should have taken weeks was stretching into months. The next day brought more troubling news. A human strike team had somehow infiltrated a Zephyrian supply depot and destroyed enough equipment to supply an entire invasion force. The security footage showed only 6 humans, moving with a coordination and efficiency that defied their primitive nature. Queen Zalara studied the footage repeatedly. These humans moved like no species she had ever encountered. They seemed to anticipate each other's actions without any visible communication. When one was wounded, the others fought harder, not retreating as logic would dictate. "Send word to the human leadership," she finally commanded. "Tell them their queen wishes to speak with one of their legendary warriors. If they truly believe in these myths, let them prove it. Let one of their champions come before me, and I will show the galaxy how easily legends die." The message was sent across the void of space, carrying the Queen's challenge to the human resistance. She expected no response, or perhaps a desperate plea for mercy. She never expected what came next 3 days after Queen Zalara's challenge was broadcast across the human territories. A single response arrived. It was not the desperate plea for mercy she expected, nor was it a rejection of her offer. Instead, it was a simple message that made her pause. "Challenge accepted. One human warrior will come." The message was followed by coordinates for a neutral space station in the Centauri Nebula, a place where diplomatic meetings between warring species occasionally took place. The location was symbolic. It had once been the site where the mighty Korthan Empire had surrendered to Zephyrian forces after a siege that lasted 3 years. Queen Zalara found herself curious despite her confidence. What kind of fool would accept certain death so readily? She decided to attend the meeting personally, bringing with her a full honor guard of her most elite warriors. If humans truly believe their legends, she would demonstrate the reality of Zephyrian power. The space station was a massive cylindrical structure that rotated slowly to provide artificial gravity. Its neutral zones were designed to accommodate hundreds of different alien species, with varying atmospheric and gravitational requirements. Queen Zalara chose the standard humanoid section, knowing that humans breathed oxygen and lived in similar gravity to dozens of other species. When she arrived with her entourage, the station's main conference chamber was already prepared. Diplomatic protocols had been established. No weapons, no hostile actions within the station's boundaries. It was a place where enemies could meet without fear of immediate violence. The Queen waited on one side of the chamber, surrounded by 12 of her personal guard. Each warrior stood over 2.5 meters tall, their natural armor gleaming under the station's lights. They carried ceremonial weapons that were nevertheless deadly, and their mere presence would intimidate most species into submission. Then, the doors on the opposite side of the chamber opened. A single human walked through. Queen Zalara blinked in surprise. She had expected a delegation, perhaps even a small army of the humans' finest warriors. Instead, one individual entered the chamber and walked calmly toward the center of the room. He was exactly what the intelligence reports had described, a bipedal mammal with no natural armor, no visible weapons, no apparent enhanced abilities. He stood perhaps 1.8 meters tall, significantly shorter than even the smallest member of her guard. His skin was darker than some humans she had seen in the surveillance footage, and his hair was cropped short in what appeared to be a military style. What struck her most was his complete lack of fear. He walked across the chamber as if he were strolling through a garden rather than approaching the most dangerous predator in known space. His eyes met hers directly, showing neither submission nor aggression, just calm assessment. Your Majesty, he said, stopping about 3 meters from her throne-like chair. His voice was steady, respectful, but not servile. I am Marcus Chun, formerly colonel in the Human Defense Corps, currently serving with the Resistance. Queen Zalara studied him carefully. There is nothing remarkable about his appearance, except for the scars that marked his exposed skin. One ran from his left temple to his jaw, another crossed his neck, just above where body armor would typically end. His hands showed the calluses of someone who had spent years handling weapons and equipment. You are the legendary warrior humanity sends to face me, she asked, unable to keep a note of amusement from her voice. This is their greatest champion? Marcus smiled slightly, an expression that somehow made him seem more dangerous rather than less. I wouldn't say greatest, Your Majesty. I'm just someone who answered the call. Do you understand what you have done by coming here? Queen Zalara leaned forward, her 4 eyes focusing on him with predatory intensity. Do you comprehend the nature of the challenge you accepted? I have some idea, Marcus replied calmly. You wanted to meet one of our legendary warriors to prove they don't exist. To show your people and ours that human resistance is built on myths and stories rather than reality. The queen's tail lashed behind her chair. This human was more perceptive than she had expected. Exactly. And you have volunteered to be the demonstration of human frailty. Tell me, Colonel Chun, do you believe you are one of these legends your people speak of? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, seeming to consider the question seriously. Legends are just stories about people who did what needed to be done when it needed doing. I've done what was necessary. Whether that makes me legendary isn't really for me to say. What have you done that your people consider so remarkable? Queen Zalara asked, genuinely curious now. This human showed no signs of the bravado or desperate courage she expected from a doomed species. I serve in the Outer Rim campaigns before your empire reached our space, Marcus said. Fought in the colonial wars, the pirate suppression missions, the asteroid belt conflicts. Led a company through the Hell's Gate operation where we extracted civilians from a mining station under siege. Commanded the defense of New Canberra when the raiders tried to take the orbital platforms. He spoke of military engagements as if they were routine activities, but Queen Zalara's intelligence networks had picked up references to some of these events. The Hell's Gate operation in particular had been considered impossible, extracting 800 civilians from a station surrounded by hostile forces while under constant fire. And you believe these minor skirmishes prepare you to face the might of the Zephyrian Empire? She asked. They prepare me to do my job, Marcus replied simply, which was to get here and deliver a message. Queen Zalara straightened in her chair. A message? Marcus nodded. You wanted to meet a human warrior to prove we're just myths and legends. But you've made a fundamental error in your understanding of what makes a human warrior dangerous. The chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of the station systems. Queen Zalara's guard tensed slightly, sensing the shift in the conversation's tone. Enlighten me, the queen said, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. Marcus took a step closer, well within the reach of her claws if she chose to strike. You think our strength comes from individual ability, from being naturally superior fighters. You're looking for superhuman powers or advanced technology or genetic enhancements. He paused, meeting her gaze directly. But that's not what makes us dangerous. What makes a human warrior isn't what we can do alone. It's what we become when we stand together. Queen Zalara felt a chill run down her spine, though she couldn't explain why. This human's words carried a certainty that seemed to bypass logic and strike directly at something primitive in her own warrior's instincts. Explain yourself, she commanded. Marcus smiled again, and this time the expression was sharp as a blade. You'll understand soon enough, Your Majesty. The demonstration is about to begin. Before she could ask what he meant, alarms began sounding throughout the space station. The station's emergency lights bathed the conference chamber in pulsing red as alerts echoed through the corridors. Queen Zalara's guard immediately moved into defensive positions around her, their hands moving to their ceremonial weapons despite the station's no-violence protocols. What is the meaning of this? Queen Zalara demanded, her multiple arms gesturing sharply as she rose from her chair. Her serpentine tail coiled beneath her, ready to strike if needed. Marcus Chun remained perfectly calm, his hands clasped behind his back as if the alarms were nothing more than background music. As I said, Your Majesty, you're about to understand what makes human warriors different. The chamber's main communications system crackled to life, and the voice of the station's Centauri administrator filled the room. All diplomatic parties, please remain in your designated areas. We are experiencing a technical malfunction with our defensive systems. Queen Zalara's eyes narrowed. The Centauri were known for their meticulous maintenance and advanced technology. Technical malfunctions were virtually unheard of in their facilities. Commander Zex, she spoke into her personal communicator. Report. What is happening? Static answered her for several seconds before her military advisor's voice came through, strained and urgent. Your Majesty, our sensors are detecting massive energy signatures approaching the station. Multiple contacts, origin unknown. They appeared suddenly, as if they were hiding behind the nebula's interference. Marcus nodded slightly, as if confirming something he already knew. The Centauri Nebula is useful for hiding fleet movements. All that ionized gas creates perfect sensor shadows if you know how to use them. You knew this would happen, Queen Zalara accused, her voice carrying deadly menace. This meeting was a deception. Not a deception, Marcus corrected mildly. You issued a challenge to face a human warrior. I accepted, but you assumed the confrontation would be personal combat between individuals. That's not how humans fight wars, Your Majesty. The chamber's viewing screens activated automatically, showing the space around the station. What Queen Zalara saw made her breath catch in her throat. Ships were emerging from the nebula's concealment like predators materializing for shadows. Dozens of them, then hundreds. They were clearly human vessels. The crude, welded construction was unmistakable, but they moved with a coordination that defied their primitive appearance. The ships formed complex attack formations as they approached, their patterns shifting and adapting in real time as if controlled by a single intelligence. Some were massive cargo haulers that had been converted into mobile weapons platforms. Others were sleek fighters that darted between the larger vessels like schools of metallic fish. Many bore the scars of previous battles, their hulls patched and repaired so many times they resembled mechanical quilts. Impossible, Queen Zalara breathed. Our intelligence reports indicated the human fleet was scattered across dozens of systems. This represents nearly their entire naval capacity. Not nearly, Marcus said quietly. This is our entire fleet. Every ship we could get running, every pilot who could still fly, every gun crew who could still fight. We pulled them from every corner of human space for this moment. The implications hit Queen Zalara like a physical blow. You abandoned the defense of your colonies, left your worlds unprotected, all for this. Marcus turned to face her fully, and, for the first time, she saw something beyond calm assessment in his eyes. She saw the cold calculation of a predator who had been patient, waiting for exactly the right moment to strike. You wanted to understand human warriors, he said. The first lesson is this. We don't fight for territory or resources or political advantage. We fight for each other. On the screens, the human fleet had completed its deployment. They surrounded the space station in a sphere formation that trapped Queen Zalara's honor guard fleet in the center. Her 12 escort ships looked pathetically small against the backdrop of hundreds of human vessels. Your Majesty, Commander Zex's voice crackled through the communicator with barely controlled panic. We are completely surrounded. Request immediate reinforcement from the nearest fleet elements. How long until our reinforcements arrive? Queen Zalara demanded. 6 hours minimum, came the reply. The nearest battle group is in the Proxima system. Marcus nodded as if this was exactly what he expected. That's the second lesson about human warriors. We don't just fight harder when we're desperate. We plan. We prepare. We wait for exactly the right moment when victory is possible. You cannot hope to defeat the entire Zephyrian Empire with one fleet, Queen Zalara said, though her voice carried less certainty than before. You're right, Marcus agreed. But we don't need to defeat your entire empire today. We just need to defeat you. The words hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Queen Zalara felt something she had not experienced in decades of conquest: uncertainty. The third lesson, Marcus continued, stepping closer despite the presence of her armed guards, is that human warriors understand something about leadership that your empire doesn't. When you remove a queen from a hive, the entire structure collapses. Queen Zalara's guards moved to protect her, but she held up one hand to stop them. You would violate the sanctuary of a neutral station? You would break the ancient laws of diplomatic immunity. The station's neutrality ends the moment you step outside its boundaries, Marcus replied. And you will step outside, because that's the fourth lesson about human warriors. We understand pride. He gestured toward the screens, where a trapped fleet waited in increasing desperation. Your honor guard is the finest the Zephyrian Empire has to offer. Each ship represents centuries of military tradition, crews that have served your family for generations. You won't abandon them to die while you cower in safety. Queen Zalara's tail lashed violently behind her. He was right, and they both knew it. The concept of a Zephyrian ruler hiding while her warriors died was unthinkable. Her entire empire was built on the principle of personal strength and martial valor. And when I come out to face your fleet? She asked. Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. Then, you'll learn the final lesson about what makes human warriors legendary. The station shuddered slightly as human ships began moving into closer formation, their weapons charging with energy signatures that lit up the sensor displays like deadly flowers blooming in space. Which is? Queen Zalara demanded. Marcus Chun, formerly colonel in the Human Defense Corps, currently the bait in the largest trap in human history, looked directly into the eyes of the galaxy's most feared predator. We don't fight fair. Queen Zalara stood motionless for long seconds, her four eyes studying Marcus Chun as if seeing him for the first time. Around them, her guards maintained their protective positions, but she could sense their growing unease as reports continued streaming in from their trapped fleet. You engineered this entire scenario, she said finally, her voice carrying a mixture of admiration and fury. The resistance, the losses, even your defeats, all calculated to bring me here. Marcus shook his head slightly. The resistance is real. The losses are real. The defeats definitely happened, and people died for them. But, yes, we knew that eventually your pride would demand a personal demonstration of Zephyrian superiority. And if I refuse to leave the station, if I order my fleet to withdraw, then you prove to every species in the galaxy that the mighty Zephyrian Empire is ruled by a coward who abandons her warriors when faced with real danger. Marcus's voice remained conversational, but his words cut like surgical instruments. Your own people would tear the Empire apart within a year. Queen Zalara's hands clenched into fists. He was right again, and the precision of his psychological warfare was as impressive as it was infuriating. Every option had been anticipated, every response planned for. The chamber's communication system activated again, but this time it wasn't the Centauri administrator. A human voice filled the room, calm and professional. Colonel Chun, this is Admiral Rodriguez aboard the Defiance. All fleet elements are in position. We have the enemy formation completely surrounded. Weapons are hot and ready. What are your orders? Queen Zalara's eyes widened. They were asking Marcus for orders. This wasn't just a warrior who had accepted her challenge. This was a military commander directing the largest human naval operation in their history. Marcus activated his own communicator. Admiral, maintain position and continue charging weapons, but do not fire unless fired upon. We're still in the diplomatic phase. Understood, Colonel. Fleet is holding pattern Alpha. Rodriguez out. Colonel. Queen Zalara asked, her voice sharp with new understanding. Your people still consider you an active military commander. Retired, technically, Marcus replied. But when your empires started conquering human colonies, retirement became a temporary condition. Most of us came back into service. Us. Marcus gestured toward the screens showing the human fleet. Every ship commander out there has fought in at least a dozen major engagements. Most of them served together during the colonial wars. We've been fighting as a unit for over 20 years. Queen Zalara began to understand the true scope of what she faced. This wasn't a desperate assembly of primitive ships manned by untrained civilians. This was the core of human military leadership, experienced commanders who had been forged in actual combat, united in a single coordinated force. How many? She asked quietly. How many what? How many experienced human military commanders are in that fleet? Marcus considered the question. Active and retired fleet officers? Maybe 300. Senior ground commanders who cross-trained for space operations? Another 200. Pilots with more than 1,000 combat hours? About 800. The numbers hit Queen Zalara like a series of physical blows. The Zephyrian Empire ruled through the strength of approximately 50 elite fleet commanders who had centuries of experience between them. Humans, in their brief existence as a spacefaring species, had produced more than 1,000 experienced military leaders. Impossible, she whispered. No species develops that many qualified commanders so quickly. Most species don't spend their entire history fighting each other, Marcus said simply. Humans have been at war with someone, somewhere, for our entire recorded history. Sometimes with other species, sometimes with pirates, mostly with each other. We've had a lot of practice. The implications were staggering. Queen Zalara had assumed human military resistance would collapse once their primitive technology was overwhelmed. She had never considered that a species might compensate for technological disadvantages with sheer depth of experience. Your Majesty, Commander Zex's voice crackled through her communicator with increasing urgency. The human ships are beginning tactical maneuvers. They appear to be testing our response times and defensive patterns. Marcus nodded as if this was expected. The probe phase. My people are mapping your capabilities, reaction speeds, weapon ranges, communication delays between ships. Standard pre-battle reconnaissance. You intend to fight? Queen Zalara asked. Only if you make it necessary, Marcus replied. I came here with a different offer. Speak. Marcus clasped his hands behind his back again, assuming a formal posture that reminded Queen Zalara uncomfortably of her own military protocols. Single combat. You and me. Winner takes all. The chamber fell silent except for the distant hum of the station's systems and the occasional alert from the surrounding fleets. Queen Zalara's guards shifted nervously, unsure whether to prepare for violence or diplomacy. You challenge me to personal combat? Queen Zalara asked, disbelief coloring her voice. You, a soft human with no natural weapons, against a Zephyrian queen. That's the offer, Marcus confirmed. You win, and the human fleet withdraws. All human resistance ends. We surrender our colonies and accept incorporation into your empire. And if you win, your empire withdraws from all human space. Permanently. No future expansion toward our colonies. No interference with human development, no claims of sovereignty over our people. Queen Zalara studied him carefully. The offer was absurd on multiple levels. A human could not possibly defeat a Zephyrian in personal combat. Her species had evolved as apex predators with natural weapons and armor that made them living instruments of war. Humans were fragile creatures that required tools and technology to survive. Yet something about Marcus Chin's absolute confidence troubled her. He stood before her like a man who held a winning hand in a card game, patient and certain despite impossible odds. What assurance do I have that your fleet will honor this agreement? She asked. The same assurance I have that yours will, Marcus replied. Military honor. The one thing our species apparently have in common. Queen Zalara considered the situation from every angle. If she accepted and won, As she inevitably would, human resistance would end without the need for costly war. Her empire would gain new territories without significant losses. Her personal reputation would be enhanced by demonstrating Zephyrian superiority over the legendary human warriors. If she refused, she faced a battle against a fleet commanded by experienced human officers in a tactical situation of their choosing. Even if she won, the losses would be significant. And if she lost, the possibility of losing seemed impossible. But Marcus Chen's calm certainty was beginning to plant seeds of doubt in her mind. "Very well," she said finally. "I accept your challenge. Single combat. Winner determines the fate of both our peoples." Marcus smiled, and, for the first time since entering the chamber, his expression showed genuine warmth rather than cold calculation. "Excellent," he said. "I was hoping you'd see it that way." "Where and when?" Queen Zalara demanded. Marcus gestured toward the viewing screens where both fleets waited in tense formation. "Here and now seems appropriate. The station has a combat arena for exactly this purpose. Unless, of course, you prefer your own ship?" Queen Zalara's pride flared at the subtle implication that she might want the advantage of familiar territory. "The station's arena will suffice." "Good," Marcus said, turning toward the chamber's exit. "I'll meet you there in 30 minutes. That should give us both time to prepare." As he walked away, Queen Zalara called after him. "Colonel Shen." He turned back. "Yes. What makes you think you can defeat me?" Marcus Chun, the man who had just maneuvered the most dangerous predator in the galaxy into exactly the trap he wanted, smiled one more time. "Because I finally figured out what human legends actually are." Then he was gone, leaving Queen Zalara alone with her guards, and a growing sense that she was about to discover something about humans that would change everything. The combat arena aboard the Centauri station was a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate the fighting styles of hundreds of different species. The circular chamber could adjust its gravity, atmosphere, and even the composition of its floor surface to ensure fair combat between radically different life forms. Queen Zalara entered the arena in her full ceremonial armor, ancient plates of crystallized chitin that had been worn by Zephyrian royalty for over 1,000 years. The armor enhanced her already formidable natural defenses while allowing full mobility of her 6 arms and serpentine tail. In her primary hands, she carried traditional Zephyrian combat blades, curved weapons that could slice through most known materials. The arena's observation galleries were filled with representatives from both fleets, along with station personnel and diplomatic observers from a dozen neutral species. The chamber hummed with translation devices and recording equipment as what might be the most significant single combat in galactic history prepared to begin. Marcus Chun entered from the opposite side of the arena, wearing simple human military fatigues and carrying no visible weapons. His appearance drew murmurs from the alien observers, many of whom had never seen a human in person. He looked impossibly fragile compared to the armored queen who waited in the arena's center. "The combat parameters have been established," announced the Centauri referee, its voice echoing through universal translators. "Standard gravity, standard atmosphere mix, no restrictions on combat techniques. Combat ends with death, surrender, or incapacitation of one participant." Queen Zalara moved into position, her natural grace evident even in the heavy armor. Her 4 eyes tracked Marcus as he approached the center of the arena, her predatory instincts cataloging potential vulnerabilities. He moved well for a human, she noted. There was a controlled precision to his movements that suggested extensive training. "You still have time to surrender," she called across the arena. "I take no pleasure in killing brave fools, but I will do what is necessary." Marcus stopped about 10 meters away from her, well within range of her natural weapons. "I appreciate the offer, but I think I'll stick with the original plan, which is to show you what human legends really are." The Centauri referee raised one crystalline arm. "Combatants ready. Begin combat in 3, 2, 1, commence." Queen Zalara struck immediately, her superior reach and speed allowing her to close the distance between them in less than a second. Her primary blade swept toward Marcus in an arc designed to bisect him at the waist, while her secondary arms prepared follow-up attacks to counter any possible escape route. The blade passed through empty air. Marcus had dropped beneath the attack, rolling forward instead of backward, moving into Queen Zalara's guard rather than away from it. His roll brought him up directly beside her lower torso, inside the reach of her longer weapons. Before she could adjust her stance, something struck her armor just above the hip joint with tremendous force. Pain shot through her nervous system as the impact created a spider web of cracks in the ancient chitin. Queen Zalara spun away, her tail lashing out to catch Marcus as he moved. The powerful appendage struck him squarely in the chest, sending him flying across the arena to slam into the far wall. Any normal human should have been killed by the impact. Queen Zalara's tail could crush steel beams and had broken the spines of creatures twice a human size. But Marcus rolled with the impact, using the wall to redirect his momentum and come up in a defensive crouch. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead, and his breathing was labored, but he was still moving, still fighting. Impossible, Queen Zalara breathed. That blow should have shattered every bone in your body. Marcus wiped blood from his eyes and smiled grimly. That's why I was trying to tell you about human legends. You've been looking for individual supernatural abilities, but that's not what makes us dangerous. He began moving again, circling around the arena's perimeter rather than approaching directly. Queen Zalara turned to track him, noting that his movement pattern was designed to keep him at the edge of her optimal striking range. Human legends aren't about individuals who are born special, Marcus continued, his voice carrying clearly across the arena despite his obvious pain. They're about ordinary people who become extraordinary through preparation, training, and refusal to quit. Queen Zalara struck again, this time leading with her tail to control his movement while her blades followed in a coordinated attack pattern. Marcus evaded the tail by diving sideways, but the maneuver put him directly in the path of her secondary blade. The weapon struck his left shoulder, cutting deep into muscle and bone. Marcus grunted with pain, but managed to grab the blade's hilt as it cut him, using his momentum to wrench it from Queen Zalara's grip while driving his elbow into her armor, where he had struck before. The damaged chitin shattered completely, exposing the vulnerable flesh beneath. Queen Zalara roared in pain and fury, swinging her remaining blade in a wild arc that forced Marcus to release her captured weapon and roll away. They separated again, both breathing hard. Queen Zalara's armor showed cracks in 3 places, and dark fluid leaked from the break above her hip. Marcus's left arm hung nearly useless at his side, and blood loss was beginning to affect his coordination. You fight well for a primitive, Queen Zalara admitted, retrieving her fallen blade. But you are still outmatched. Your injuries will slow you with each exchange while my natural healing accelerates. Probably true, Marcus agreed, switching his remaining weapon to his right hand. But you're still missing the point about human warriors. Enlighten me, Queen Zalara said, beginning another cautious advance. Marcus shifted his stance, and Queen Zalara suddenly realized he was no longer moving like an injured human. Despite his wounds, his positioning was perfect, his balance flawless, his eyes tracking her movement with the precision of a dedicated predator. Human legends aren't individuals, he said quietly. They're what happens when someone decides that something is more important than their own survival. Queen Zalara felt a chill run through her nervous system. There was something different about Marcus now, something that triggered instinctive warnings in her predator's brain. He no longer looked like prey struggling for survival. He looked like something much more dangerous. Every human child grows up hearing stories about people who stood their ground when everything was against them. Marcus continued, beginning his own advance for the first time since the combat began. People who fought on when they were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing certain death. People who chose to stand and fight because something behind them was worth protecting. Queen Zalara struck with everything she had, all 6 arms moving in a coordinated assault that should have been impossible to counter. Marcus moved through the attack like water, redirecting rather than blocking, using Queen Zalara's own strength against her while targeting the weak points in her armor with surgical precision. When the exchange ended, Queen Zalara found herself on her knees, her primary weapon scattered across the arena floor. Marcus stood behind her, a captured blade pressed against the joint where her neck met her torso. "The thing about human legends," Marcus said softly, his voice carrying to every observer in the arena, "is that we don't fight to win. We fight so that someone else doesn't have to." Queen Zalara felt the blade's edge against her scales and realized with shock that she had been defeated. Not by superior strength or speed or natural weapons, but by something she had never encountered before, an opponent who fought without regard for personal survival, whose every move was calculated not for personal victory, but for a larger purpose. "I yield," she said quietly. The arena fell silent except for the sound of their breathing. Around the observation galleries, representatives from dozens of species tried to process what they had just witnessed. A human, the galaxy's newest and apparently weakest species, had just defeated the most feared warrior in known space. Marcus stepped back, lowering the weapon. "The agreement stands. Your empire withdraws from human space." Queen Zalara rose slowly to her feet, her pride wounded more than her body. "It will be honored. But answer me one question. What? How many more like you do the humans have?" Marcus looked around the arena, his gaze taking in the human fleet officers watching from the galleries, then settling back on Queen Zalara. "Your Majesty," he said with complete sincerity, "I'm not even close to being our best." Queen Zalara stared at him for a long moment, then began to laugh, a sound like breaking crystal that echoed throughout the arena. It was the laughter of a predator who had finally encountered something more dangerous than herself. "The Zephyrian Empire will remember this day," she said finally, "and we will remember humanity." As the two fleets began their withdrawal from the neutral station, word of the combat spread across the galaxy at the speed of hyperspace communication. The story would be told and retold, becoming legend itself. How a human warrior had faced the galaxy's apex predator and won, not through superiority, but through something the galaxy had never seen before. Humanity had announced itself to the cosmos not as conquerors or victims, but as something far more dangerous, protectors who would never stop fighting as long as there was something worth protecting behind them. The age of human legends had truly begun. The massive throne room of the Zephyrian Empire stretched out like a dark cathedral, its crystalline walls pulsing with an eerie blue light. Queen Zalara sat upon her obsidian throne, her 6 arms gracefully draped over the armrests while her serpentine tail coiled beneath her. Her scaled skin shimmered with natural armor plating that had evolved over millions of years, making her species the most feared warriors in the known galaxy. Before her stood representatives from dozens of conquered worlds, each bearing tribute from their defeated civilizations. The Krillian Beastmasters offered exotic creatures from their jungle worlds. The Techno-Priests of Meridian presented advanced weapons that could level mountains. The Crystal Singers of Andromeda brought sonic devices capable of shattering entire fleets. But today was different. Today, the Queen had received word of a new species that dared to resist her expanding empire. A species that called themselves humans. "Your Majesty," spoke Commander Zex, her chief military advisor, his voice a harsh rasp through his breathing apparatus. "The scouts have returned from the Outer Rim territories. They bring news of the human resistance." Queen Zalara's 4 eyes narrowed as she leaned forward slightly. "Tell me of these humans. What makes them think they can defy the might of the Zephyrian Empire?" Commander Zex activated a holographic display that showed images of human settlements, their primitive cities, and their laughably simple technology. They're a young species, barely evolved from their homeworld. Their technology is crude, their weapons basic projectile systems that fire metal slugs. Their ships are held together with welded metal plates and chemical propulsion. A ripple of laughter echoed through the throne room from the assembled alien dignitaries. The idea that such a primitive species would dare to resist the Empire was absurd. They have no natural armor, Zex continued, gesturing to the holographic humans. No claws, no venom, no psychic abilities. They are soft, fragile creatures that live for barely a century. Their bones break easily, their skin tears at the slightest contact with our weapons. Queen Zalara studied the images with growing amusement. Humans appeared to be bipedal mammals with no visible natural defenses. They were hairless except for small patches on their heads, had only 2 arms and 2 legs, and seemed to require external coverings to protect their delicate skin from their own environment. And yet, she said, her voice carrying a dangerous edge, they continue to resist. My fleets report unexpected losses. How do you explain this, Commander? Zex's breathing apparatus wheezed as he shifted uncomfortably. The humans fight with unpredictable tactics, Your Majesty. They seem to ignore conventional military doctrine. When our forces land on their worlds expecting organized resistance, they find chaos instead. Humans attack from unexpected angles, use their own damaged ships as weapons, and refuse to surrender even when facing certain death. Desperation, Queen Zalara dismissed with a wave of one of her hands. All primitive species fight harder when cornered. It changes nothing. What are their warriors? Surely a species so weak must have some elite fighting force. That is where it becomes strange, Your Majesty, Zex replied, pulling up more data. They speak of their warriors as if they were legends. Stories passed down through generations of individuals who possess impossible abilities. They call them heroes, champions, soldiers who single-handedly turn the tide of entire wars. The queen's tail lashed behind her throne. Impossible. No single individual, regardless of species, could stand against the combined might of our legions. These are clearly primitive myths, stories told to give hope to a dying race. Perhaps, Your Majesty. But our interrogations of captured humans reveal something disturbing. They genuinely believe these stories. They speak of humans who have survived impossible odds, who have defeated enemies many times their size and strength. They tell tales of warriors who fight on even when mortally wounded, who sacrifice themselves to save others, who turn certain defeat into victory through sheer determination. Queen Zalara stood from her throne, her impressive height casting shadows across the chamber. At nearly 3 meters tall, with her natural armor and multiple limbs, she was a living weapon that had personally led the conquest of 17 worlds. Myths and legends, she declared, her voice echoing off the crystalline walls. Every dying species clings to such stories. The humans will fall like all the others before them. Their primitive weapons and fragile bodies are no match for evolved perfection. But even as she spoke, a small part of her mind wondered about the reports. The humans had managed to destroy 3 entire battlecruisers in the past month alone. Their losses were mounting, and the conquest that should have taken weeks was stretching into months. The next day brought more troubling news. A human strike team had somehow infiltrated a Zephyrian supply depot and destroyed enough equipment to supply an entire invasion force. The security footage showed only 6 humans, moving with a coordination and efficiency that defied their primitive nature. Queen Zalara studied the footage repeatedly. These humans moved like no species she had ever encountered. They seemed to anticipate each other's actions without any visible communication. When one was wounded, the others fought harder, not retreating as logic would dictate. Send word to the human leadership, she finally commanded. Tell them their queen wishes to speak with one of their legendary warriors. If they truly believe in these myths, let them prove it. Let one of their champions come before me, and I will show the galaxy how easily legends die. The message was sent across the void of space, carrying the Queen's challenge to the human resistance. She expected no response, or perhaps a desperate plea for mercy. She never expected what came next.